We're going to talk about ketosis. So ketosis just simply means fat burning in the body. And the reason why it's called ketosis is because the easiest fat to burn is a ketone. And there's 3 kinds of ketones. I'm not going to get too much into the chemistry of it. But the ketosis diet or ketogenic diet was developed in the 1920s at the Mayo Clinic. And the reason why is because prior to the 1920s, people all across the country were fasting. And there were sanitariums and sanatoriums. I guess there's a difference. But throughout the United States, you could go to these places and fast for 30 days or 40 days and reverse your cancer, reverse epilepsy, of course reverse diabetes, lose a bunch of weight, get rid of the lesions on your skin, and then the government shut that down. Isn't that great? We love our government. And here's a book that documents that. This is called The Fasting Cure by Upton Sinclair, and this printing, this is 1910 right here. So I was lucky enough to get this book and read through it. 1911 actually. And he interviewed over 200 people that fasted. He fasted, and he interviewed a guy named Bernard McFadden, who was actually in, where's Kellogg's at? Not Grand Rapids. Battle Creek, yeah. So right across the street from Kellogg's Sanitarium was Bernard McFadden's fasting place. And then there's a woman named Dr. Hazard, and she was in Portland, I believe. She's on the West Coast. And she fasted like 2,500 people. But the government chased her down and squashed her. So after that was shut down, by 1915 or the late 19-teens, the Mayo Clinic said, well, we still have epileptic kids. So they created this ketogenic diet so you can mimic the benefits of fasting and still eat every day. So that's why ketosis exists, to mimic the benefits of fasting and still eat every day. So when you have a kid with epilepsy and you do this diet right, they're cured in 4 days. So along come the 1940s, and drugs that help with epilepsy, they're pretty good. And so even today, the standard of care for epilepsy is you put them on the drugs first. And if the first one doesn't work, you try the second one, then the third one, and the fourth one, and then you run out of options. Then you try ketosis. Okay, so the point here is that really for epilepsy, you wouldn't put the kid on the ketogenic diet first, and drugs could come later. But what we've been learning in the last 20 years is that ketosis is more than just for epilepsy. It's actually, what it is, it's your body is filled with fat. It's saturated with fat. And the cells are using the fat as energy instead of sugar. And I call that fat fluid. You want your body to be fat fluid. And so you get the fat in the blood higher than the sugar in the blood. So it's good for, and it's part of a really good basic foundational diet for cancer. It reverses diabetes. It prevents heart disease. And it can take the plaquing out of the arteries. And I'm saying a lot of things that people might argue against, but it completely makes sense, and there's very little research on it, but it's expanding at an exponential rate. Even at U of M, one of my friends that I have lunch with once a week, his daughter at U of M is in charge of ketosis studies. And so they have mice or lab rats and controls, and then they have other lab rats that they feed a high-carb diet. But the rats that they feed a ketogenic diet, all they eat is lard. And the rats are so slippery, you got to put on a glove to grab onto the rat because they're just saturated with fat. And guess what? They don't, the point is they don't get cancer, heart disease, because their mitochondria are burning up the fat. So there's no fat to be deposited in the arteries, right? And but what I've learned in the last year is the mechanism of chronic disease and how ketosis plays a part, and how this mechanism of chronic disease is how it drives osteoporosis, calcification of the arteries, plaquing in the arteries, cancer, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, anxiety, and I have a list of 86 diseases and symptoms long that is the mechanism of chronic disease, which is lactic acidosis.